the fight is for constituents and for the American people, and it's against whoever is hurting them. Again, it could be a political person, it could be a corporation, it could be a foreign country, it could be a cartel bringing in fentanyl. When we're talking about I'm going to fight them or I'm going to resist that party agenda, you lose 90% of people who are oh, you're just another politician. You're thinking about it not the way I think about it, which is what are you doing for me? Are you fighting for me? Do you understand what I care about? So I think we have to pick very strategic fights that are rooted in where people are and what they want us to fight for.
We are back. He won decisively in November in New York's 18th Congressional District, which is a big swing district representing the Hudson Valley. He's a graduate of West Point, a former Army intelligence officer, served 2 tours in Iraq. It's Congressman Pat Ryan. How you doing, man? I'm
good. Thanks for having me on. I'm a big fan, so it's cool to be on.
All right, appreciate it. We'll see if you're a big fan at the end. I'm feeling punchy today.
I love it. Me too. Army Navy week, so we're fired up to be Navy in football this weekend, so I got my competitive juices flowing.
Oh yeah, it's a good season for Army. Let's do a quick little speed dating for people who don't know you. Kind of just quick on your background, the district, and your results this time, which kind of outpaced the top of the ticket pretty significantly.
Yeah, so I represent the Hudson Valley, which is about an hour and a half north of New York City. It's outer suburbs and exurbs. It's where I grew up. It's where I went to college at West Point, so I get to represent my alma mater in Congress here, which is pretty cool and one of the fun parts of this job. And obviously, it's now where I'm living. My wife, Rebecca, and I have 2 young boys that are both the joy and the exhaustion in our lives, 5 and almost 3. And this is a super competitive seat, the 18th Congressional District. Last time in 2022, which is my first election, we won the seat by 1.3%. So we worked really hard to win by a little bit more this time, and we did really well. We actually won by over 13%. So to me, that's I take great optimism and hope from that if you work hard, are responsive, sort of show up everywhere, and try to just be less partisan and more a patriot, which has sort of been my ethos in this job, then you can actually win trust of people back. And I think that's obviously the currency of this whole thing.
Look, you win by 1.5 points, and then the national environment shifts 4 points the other way, 4 or 5 points the other direction. That should be an L. You should have been swept up in that wave. And so instead you are countervailing. Talk about why that happened. Is it part demographics of the district? Is it because your opponent was terrible? Was it all just your charm? How do you assess what was happening in your race and how it bucked the national trend?
Certainly not my charm. My wife would attest to that. But a few things, probably the main drivers. My opponent was actually really a great opponent, both on paper and she ran a strong campaign, retired NYPD officer in an area where you got a lot of cops and firefighters from New York City. She ran a good campaign. They spent a lot of money against me. So it was a competitive campaign. And this gets to the heart of what you've been talking about and what we're all, I think, working on, which is I basically won by running against the core brand of my own party, of the Democratic Party. And not something I necessarily set out to do, but in listening to my constituents, which we do a lot of, I have this mobile constituent services van where we go to all 82 towns over and over and over, tons of town halls, actually telephone town halls. I love, we get thousands of people on those. And just being in real engagement with my voters, the positions I took listening to them were increasingly just disconnected from what the national brand is and what a lot of the national priorities are. So I think we really won because in our campaign ads in particular, talked about being a different kind of Democrat, calling out Biden on the border, calling for him to step aside, challenging our own state party leaders on some bad transportation policy, which I won't bore you with the wonky details of, but just being true independent voice for my constituents and against anybody doing them harm, whether that's a big corporation, a local power utility monopoly that we battled against, or a president in either party. And I'll do the same thing with Trump, and I did it, in the past as well.
So just listen to that answer. And the vice president, she lost the district by what? Do you know?
She actually won the district by about a point, and then we won by about like 13
okay,
and a half.
Got it. So you outperformed her by not 12. So, I mean, listening to that answer, though, like that gap, it seems to me that there's all this kind of discussion about the tactics of the campaign, but that the core thing that you did that she was unable or unwilling to do was distance from Biden, right? And to me, it seems like that sometimes gets a little bit washed away in all these conversations because everybody has their ideological, kind of agenda that they want to fill, but just being anti-incumbent, right? Like being anti whatever it is that people don't like about the, existing establishment, seemed like a critical element to the Democratic nominee, and because of the situation she was in or whatever, she just wasn't able to make that case.
I think that's right. It's both separation or independence from Biden individually, but it also is from the Democratic brand. Like imagine I think it's less on policy, frankly, and more on style and almost culture. And this is something I'm trying to figure out all this. So I certainly have nothing figured out here. I'm just trying to think out loud. Normally I think in my head, but given how badly we lost, I've been trying to think out loud more because I think that's what we owe our country right now. And
this is the space for thinking out loud. It's a problem.
Yeah, dangerous, but normally in my profession. But I think it's less about any individual policy issue. It's more about what we choose to focus on and what we don't focus on, and sort of this if you try to be everything to everyone, you're sort of nothing to everyone. And to me, the macro thing that happened in this election, in a lot of House races, even local races, and certainly the presidential, is number one clear pain point and challenge for almost everybody, 95% of Americans, is affordability, economic pain, both immediate and I would argue systemic inequality, but certainly immediate affordability crunch. So that's what's on people's mind. And so for many Democrats, not only were we not speaking to that, which in and of itself is hugely problematic and disconnected, but then we're also talking about other things that weren't that. So it's a double whammy of not only are you not hearing me and working on the thing I want, but you're also focusing on these other things that I might have a thought on or an opinion on, but are not central to my life. And so separating, to your point, the ideological piece of that, it's just good representation and actually listening to people and sort of showing rather than telling, which I think is something important stylistically for us to improve on.
So was that the handcuffs of incumbency? That Joe was just I didn't know what to do because the economy was getting better in macro, and so we don't know whether to brag about the economy or to talk about the way that people are suffering in it, and so we sort of felt handcuffed and weren't able to say anything. Do you think it was that, or do you think that there is something more fundamental? I mean, affordability is a problem everywhere. It's particularly a problem in blue states and blue-run cities, and that maybe having a Democrat that was saying, I'm going to go fix this, and I see it and see that it's a problem and we're going to change it, might have been a better option.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened is we became, as a party nationally, defenders of the status quo when the status quo isn't fucking, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse.
No, fucking
isn't working for everybody. Yeah. And that's incredibly frustrating to me.
You're not that big of a fan of the podcast if you don't know whether or not you can cuss, unless you're asking somebody off camera for their for your permission.
I don't know, whatever. I'll just be me. But so
defenders of the status quo, you're saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's how do we become that? And I think that was the box that it's easy to get yourself wrapped up in. If I believe in the power of government to be a force for good and the power of institutions. And so there's this I think a lot of us grew up in that mindset, and I still believe it. But then you have to recognize believing in those things is different from recognizing they're not working. And if you actually believe in something, you have to fix it to make it work so people see that. And instead of just like defending a failing thing, you say, no, I love this thing so much that I want to fix it, which is also to me like how I feel about our country right now at a macro level, and why I want to do this job. And so I think that was the tension he was wrestling with. And the other piece of it, which I know you might not agree with based on some of the things you've said and even written recently, I do think we have to more clearly call out the villains and the heroes. Like, if you don't give people an explanation for why they're feeling pain that is clear and credible and authentic, then it's like a vacuum and it gets filled with the MAGA conspiracy theory, crazy, destructive populist stuff. And we did not offer a competing explanation or story with heroes and villains. And to me, that's the opportunity space, is like, if Trump's story is like, we know who his villains are. That's kind of the usual cast. And he is the hero. Like, it's him. He's the only one who can fix it. He starts this autocratic, I will fix all your problems. To me, the story we need to tell is the villains are, whether it's like too powerful corporations, which we can debate. I believe that's a big part of it. Corrupt public officials, and a set of, like, not broadly defined, but specific bad actors. And the heroes are the American people. Like, whether that's working people, whether that's a scrappy entrepreneur, like I've started 2 startups. I get what that's about. That's foundational to our DNA. So telling that story, I think, is the opportunity and the need for us.
The heroes are not very active social media posters and academics. I don't know if that's right, because this is what you're hearing from some people on social media right now, that the way that the Democrats do not become the defenders of the status quo is to go after executives, go after CEOs, and that because of the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO, this is an opportunity for Democrats to talk about how they are going to go after the health insurance industry with the same vigor as Luigi, and that it's the Republicans that are defenders of these corporate raiders and bullies that don't want to give you coverage for your chemo. What do you think about that frame?
Yeah. I mean, my wife and I have actually been talking a lot about this. I mean, I think we just have to be very clear in saying, and I know you've said this, like, it is absolutely 100,000% unacceptable to use violence, political violence, to obviously commit murder, regardless of anything.
And it's kind of unclear that this is even political. This might be a psychotic break, but yeah.
Yeah, right. But we've seen this whole rise in political violence. And so the way I've been thinking about this, and again, thinking it through in real time, is like, if our political system, which in a functioning democracy is the venue you go to if you are frustrated with something and you want to change it, if our political system is so failing people so deeply that they have such anger and resentment and pain, and and that's, I think, authentic for many, many, many people in my district and across the country, and they feel they can't use the sort of like legitimate means to change that, then I'm not certainly sanctioning or justifying this, but that's, I think, how you get to, maybe not this situation, we don't have all the details yet, but you get to a lot of these incidents of political violence. And so I think we have to wrestle with the fact that people are, like, to me, the bigger zoom out is people are so frustrated and the system's failing to meet those frustrations, and they feel like they're powerless. And so whether they turn to physical, horrific violence like this, or they turn to Donald Trump, like, if we don't give a better functional alternative, you get horrific, violent outcomes.
I want to get to the Trump side of it, but let's put a finer point on it, because I was being a little cheeky with the way I phrased the question about whether Democrats should, get Luigi tattoos or whatever. But how does it look for right? I mean, there's some that'll say, well, it's got to be like Bernie, or you can run on Medicare for all who want it, which I would be fine with. Or, that's one way to do this, to talk about policy. I'm kind of skeptical that breaks through. the other way to do it is to talk about how these health insurance CEOs are killing people and that they should be brought before Congress and upbraided and they should be, demagogued against, and that actually would have greater effect, and that's something that they deserve and we should do anyway. Like, obviously there's a middle ground, there's a million different ways to do it. Like, what does it look like? How do you run against the system in a way that you think is efficacious?
So this is where I disagree with the Bernie rhetoric and policy. If he says the system is rigged, I don't agree with that, because that characterizes the entire system as, in my view, wrong and failing and corrupt. What I actually think is happening is most of our systems and institutions are, have lasted us a long time and gotten us this far. They're not perfect, but they're largely functioning, and most people are good actors trying to do the right things. What we have to focus on is the people exploiting and being essentially corrupt, bad actors within a system that I don't think is largely broken, or certainly not rigged in the way that it's, I think, received by a lot of people. So the local example of this in my district was, we have this utility company, and in New York State and a lot of places, it's essentially a monopolistic system. You have one choice for your utility. And when you have corporate failure and malpractice and corruption, which we had this whole incident where they screwed up a billing system, people were getting their savings accounts wiped out, tens of or hundreds of thousands of dollars, years long debacle, where right at the time of COVID, when people are getting crushed, they're just getting another pounding on them. And this wasn't this is different than what their profit was, or, is that the right level of profit? This was no, they just failed to do the things they need to do, just straight up corporate failure. And we hammered them, and are frankly continuing to hammer them and hold them accountable. Got a huge $60 million settlement to pay back people that were harmed. So I think it's us being willing to say, we still believe in a lot of these systems and the fundamentals of our economy, but there are bad actors who are getting either greedy or corrupt or both. And you have to make an example of those people, in other walks of life. And then that helps sort of correct and get the system back to a more, reasonable, effective, for the greater good mode.
All right, you're selling me. That's a populism I could get behind. What I think of, what you say that makes me think of, is when the vice president first started the campaign, there was kind of in the bio ads this, I went after the big banks after the foreclosure crisis. And I don't even really, to be honest, remember exactly the details of what she did, which sort of, I think, explains the problem. Right. So given that
you got to show, not tell. This. Right. If you're saying it and no one's I remember that, then you've, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, but had she done that, and had there been an example, and really, talked about it every time, talked about it in speeches, talked about it in ads, and positioned herself as a fighter against that. That's the kind of populism you could sell me on. All right, I got, here's my problem with all of this stuff. Is the Donald Trump side? Is that Donald Trump is full of shit. He doesn't actually care about people. He doesn't care about anybody but himself. He's screwed regular people over his whole life. He's almost comically kind of self-centered. And so if the thesis is that the Democrats didn't show that they care enough about regular people, and Trump did, how does that square with the reality of Trump? It seems to me that then the lesson here is, well, we should just Democrats should just have a fake con man of their own who pretends to care about people. All right, because it's not like he was it's not like he's Bill Clinton out there with the "I hear your pain" stuff.
So I think I was talking about this yesterday with somebody. There's sort of two aspects in a perfect world. If it's a matrix, one is showing the fight, a willingness to fight, be a fighter, be tough, be strong. The other, though, is the care and the empathy, meaning that you're fighting from a place of giving a shit and being a compassionate person and core human and I think American values. And it's sort of in the perfect world, you have the balance of those both. People know you're willing to fight, but they know you're doing it because it's coming from a good place. Trump obviously shows the fight. But like, I think people are smart enough to know he is a greedy, corrupt, self-centered person, and he's never tried to hide that. What we failed to do is, like, as a party, and even you could say at a many candidate level, like, I think people know, like, we're coming, I think, from a place of like caring about people and almost this more soft version of that. But we don't show the willingness to then marshal that to a fight, to fight for them. And the opportunity space in the next 2 and 4 years, 2 years midterm, 4 years presidential, is like Trump's going to continue to show who he is and remind people of that. And I think be incredibly damaging both in the immediate term and from a constitutional perspective as well. We have to be able to show them that fight, but that we're doing it like for the right reasons. My working title, to me, it's patriotic populism. It's a constructive, not destructive, unifying sense of getting back to the values, like, of why we formed the country in the first place. Like, we were under the thumb of a dictator and didn't have representation, and we fought from a sense of fairness and sort of empathy for a greater collective good. So it's this sort of like more American collective populism. And at times you saw this from like a Teddy Roosevelt, certainly from an FDR, even like a Lincoln in some ways. And I think that is the right direction. I don't, I'm still sort of thinking that stuff through.
I don't mind patriotic populism. Thinking about the tariffs on Mexico, and we can kind of have a Boston tequila party.
I'm not a tequila guy. I'm more a whiskey guy. Whiskey rebellion.
Okay, whiskey rebellion. Yeah, there might be something there once the tariffs start hitting our Casamigos. Y'all, with Syria being back in the news, the refugee crisis is at the forefront of people's minds again. But I bet you have no idea how many people have been forced to flee their homes throughout the world. The answer, 122.6 million. If that were a country, it'd be the 6th largest in the world. Every day, people all around the globe leave their homes because of violence, ethnic, religious, or territorial conflict, persecution, political upheaval, and other crises. In 58 countries, people on the move can look to the Jesuit Refugee Service for help. JRS is a ministry of the Jesuits, the Catholics you might know best for their schools and universities. Their work in education is especially meaningful here, as they operate schools and refugee camps and offer job training, mental health support, and community building programs worldwide to support those who have had to leave behind everything they know to keep themselves or their families safe. JRS is known for going where others don't and staying long after others have left, standing in solidarity with those experiencing the impacts of world events that others have stopped posting to Instagram about. Their mission is to accompany, serve, and advocate for the forcibly displaced people so that they can determine their own futures. I've been talking about this all month now, but the Jesuits have meant a lot to me in my formation, in my reading, philosophy, view of the world, how to treat people. I've had my issues with the Catholics. I think I mentioned that on yesterday's podcast. But the Jebbies, though, they always treated me right. And I think that their work with regards to refugees and with regards to education and people that have really been left behind by circumstance is something that I admire. I was glad to be a part of it, doing service time. It was around this time of year, actually, in high school, every year, that we'd take 2 weeks off school and go do a service mission somewhere, either around Colorado or around the world. It was all formative and important to me, and it's an important organization. If you're looking for somebody to support this holiday season, I couldn't recommend anything more than the Jesuit Refugee Services. So if you want to do something good today, go visit JRS USA online, read some of the stories about their work, and then make a donation or look at other ways of supporting JRS's work like advocacy or volunteering. To check them out and show the Bulwark sent you, visit jrsusa.org/bulwark. That's jrsusa.org/bulwark. Let's get practical then on this. Because we might have found another area of disagreement. I think maybe the Democrats should just do the fighting part for 2 years and worry about the empathy part in 2027. And I think that goes against the nature of progressives and Democrats, and so I kind of am not hopeful that'll actually happen. But, we've got a couple inflection points coming up in the next 2 months. There's going to be a fund the government effort that the House is going to have to do. they are going to try to jam through a border funding bill, and they are going to try to extend the Trump tax cuts. So those three things, I look at those three things and I think at least two of them, I don't think the Democrats should lift one fucking finger to help them do. But I'm intrigued by your point of view on that.
No, I agree with you. I think we need to show the fight, to be clear. Like, if we're doing a brand
I'm
rehab
just saying, as you could hear the fighting for the right reasons as we got to fight, but we also, if the Trump administration is going to do something good, we got to work with them on that to do constituent service. You know what I mean? Versus, no, actually let them do it. So anyways, I'm sorry.
Continue. Yeah, well, so I think this is the difference. It's easy. I've only been doing this a few years, but like, I think it's easy to be like, the fight is against another party or another politician, like, and not talk about like the fight is for fucking constituents and for the American people, and it's against whoever is hurting them. Like, again, it could be a political person. It could be a corporation. It could be a foreign country. Like, it could be a cartel bringing in fentanyl. Like, when we're talking about like I'm going to fight them or I'm going to resist that party agenda, like, you lose 90% of people who are like, oh, you're just another politician. Like, you're thinking about it, not the way I think about it, which is like, what are you doing for me? Are you fighting for me? Do you understand what I care about? So I think we have to pick very strategic fights that are rooted in where people are and what they want us to fight for. So I do think like really fighting on fairness around the tax bill is going to be incredibly important. I think that's by far the most important fight. I called out Biden on the border stuff because he just, I think, failed to do it in a way that shouldn't be seen as political, but certainly was. But like, whatever they put forward, my guess is going to be extreme. But I think that's just on them to carry and put forth their view of it. And same with funding the government. I was very frustrated these 2 years when we bailed them out multiple times and didn't. And then I didn't, but many of my colleagues voted to make Johnson the speaker again, who's like a traitor and election denier. Like, I don't understand what the fuck we're doing if that's the approach.
All right. So we might be pretty close. So on the funding the government,
we might agree more than you think.
On the funding, no, that's good. That's good. On the funding the government, I think I guess it was maybe less about me and you than me and what I project to be the likely House Democrat position on some of this stuff. Yeah. So in funding the government, you concur that they make them do it themselves. The tax cuts, that's the big fight. We concur on that. The immigration thing is tougher. Because part of me is like, I don't know, maybe that is the one that I know this goes totally contrary to maybe there'll be some Democrats who just on a values level are like, I can't do this. But I don't know. Like, is there not, maybe that is the place to deal with them and say, let's do this. Let's fund the fentanyl stuff. Let's bring the Langford bill back. And you know what I mean? And like, but I guess the problem with that is eventually when it's like, they'll include some stuff in that's just so noxious that you can't get behind, right? I don't know.
Well, and they'll exclude stuff that's really important too. Like, this is where I'm guessing and telegraphing what I think they're going to do. Like, they're going to, like, I have a huge agricultural economy.
Yeah.
Most of what they're going to do is be devastating I have mostly apple farms. Like, we're second behind Washington State to apples in the Hudson Valley nationally. Yeah. The labor markets are going to be hammered by this. Military recruiting is going to be harmed as we lose more and more young people. Like, if there's not a economic component to understanding the sort of economic and labor market impacts of cutting off what has been the engine of American dynamism since our country's founding, like, we have to make that case. I think that's grounded in where people are. Like, whether you're a farmer who's seeing the same family that's been farming for you for 40, 50 years now can't come, whether you're an entrepreneur who can't get that talented engineer because they cut down on H-1 visas. Like, those are the fights to me that are where popular and populist, because that's just where most people are.
Yeah, I think that's smart. What is there anything else upcoming that you're seeing in Congress that's going to be a priority for you?
I mean, I'm weighing the same sort of how much do you fight on some of the nominees. I have been very focused on Hegseth because I'm on the Armed Services Committee. I'm a veteran. The fact that he could be Secretary of Defense is incredibly dangerous, and I think unfair to our men and women in uniform who deserve so much better on almost every dimension of his experience, his personal hot mess of a life, his warped worldview, and I mean, this the military is far from perfect, but it's something very like personally important to me, and at a dangerous, serious time in the world, important I think should be to everybody. And the fact that this is the guy, like, we have to fight this fight and push the Republican senators who are now getting cowered into the corner by the MAGA attack mob that they launch on people, because this is like, if they fold there, then I think they're just going to fold for the next 2 to 4 years.
I think that's exactly right. Would you meet with Pete? Have you heard from him? Has he tried to meet with any Democrats on armed services? I know you're in the House, but
yeah, I mean, he's not meeting with House people. Yeah, I would definitely. I mean, I actually have a lot of personal friends who know him, and by many accounts, like, his time in uniform, he was a good platoon leader and a reasonable, thoughtful guy. And I don't really. I mean, there's a lot of. I think,
he was sober then, so that was part of it.
That's part of it. I think. Look, like, I fought in these wars too. These are our country's longest wars. There are people that came out of there like affected in a lot of ways,
sure,
and I think
for sure
some of them are healthy and important skepticism about the use of military force, and the disconnect between civilian military leadership, political and appointed, and like troops on the ground and the American people. Like, those are all healthy, important debates to have. But he is like a toxic force, and there are so many other good, qualified folks like Republicans that could do it, that I wouldn't agree with maybe on some policy, but are like serious, qualified adults, who could be in this job.
Yeah, crazy. Okay. I have 2 fun ones to end with for you.
That wasn't fun.
No, these have all been fun actually, but I keep fun ones at the end for the politicians who aren't fun, which is some of them, many. Which leads me to this question. A lot of discussion about the Democrats' lack of communicating with young men. I would like you to nominate a colleague to go on a bro podcast, to go on Theo Von or the Nelk Boys. Who do you think could do that and be a good communicator?
I think we have a lot of younger, newer House members that are like just real people, real guys, real men, whatever, like, who could go talk sports, talk culture, talk, like, for me, Army football, talk about wrestling with my boys, like, just be a normal human.
Yeah.
I think my really good buddy who I think would do a great job is a guy named Chris DeLuzio. He's a Naval Academy graduate. That's the one part I don't, like about him. But he's a, veteran, like a very working class, blue collar, pro union, real person who could go on and talk about, whatever. Like, his big legislative push was actually a rail safety bill after the train derailments in East Palestine, because his district borders that. Like, he's focused on real stuff that's going to help people. I think he'd be good. I mean, there's a lot of people. This is, I think, an opportunity too for, like, we got to put more other faces and people forward to broaden the view of our brand as a party. That's obviously a takeaway from November.
Crystal Luzia, all right. I was zagging. I was like, I think that the move is to put MGP on there, Marie Gluesenkamp Perez.
She's great. Jared Golden, Marie, like
having kind of a woman who's probably actually more capable than Theo at like fixing cars.
Angie,
and shit.
So Angie Craig. I don't know if you know Angie.
Craig, I do know Angie.
She would kick ass on any of those shows. Like, she's tough as hell. Sharice Davids was an MMA fighter. Like, we've got good people. We just gotta be out there talking and connecting.
Those are some good nominations. It's a little tougher. We can just admit it's a little tougher at the highest level. It's a little tougher.
Well,
at the highest level,
that's
somebody that'd be good, and that is a problem.
It's a big part of the problem. Yes.
All right. I only added this question halfway through since you seem so nervous about cussing, but I figured I'd ask what your favorite curse is.
I mean, I'm just a good old fashioned fuck guy. Like when you're deployed, it's just every other word. And when I get going, my wife is like, Jesus, man, what's wrong with
Chill
you?
out, Pat.
Yeah.
Calm down, Pat. We've got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. All right, man. That's been wonderful. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I think these are important discussions. You've given me some nominees of other colleagues that I should have on. I actually didn't know that Charisse was a former MMA fighter. So
she's great. She's a badass.
So we should reach out to her, and we'll keep these combos going in 2025. All right, brother?
Thank you for having me. Thanks for the work you're doing.
All right, appreciate you. All right, everybody else, we'll be back here tomorrow for another edition of Bulwark Podcast. We'll see y'all then. Peace.